everybody? Ready? Ready to go?
Ready.
Okay. This is the RC Redwood Coast Energy Authority meeting of September 28th. And we did just find out that Director Myers will be here, but will be coming in remotely in a bit, shortly. So this is a hybrid meeting, and how about, who's going to read the whole? Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is RCEA staff member Ronnie Chaussee speaking. Before Chair Sherry Wu calls this in-person and online hybrid meeting to order, here are some housekeeping announcements. For those of you here at Jefferson Community Center, the microphones will be on throughout the meeting and are very sensitive. Please do not speak while someone else has the floor. Mics go silent when this happens, and online and phone participants cannot hear what is being said. When speaking, please identify yourself for the benefit of remote participants. Online board members, please keep your cameras on and unmute your microphones when you're speaking. For community members participating in the public comment periods, please come to the podium if you were able so the microphone picks up your voice. Online participants, click the raise hand button in the webinar controls. Phone participants, press *9 to raise your hand. Public comments may be limited to 3 minutes at the chair's discretion. Please raise your hand early so we don't miss prompting you for your turn to speak. Emailed public comments are accepted before and during the meeting at publiccomment@redwoodenergy.org. Online participants, if you experience phone or internet disruptions during this meeting, please notify us if possible by calling or texting 707-382-7336 or by emailing publiccomment@redwoodenergy.org. And that's all of our participation announcements. Chair Wu?
Thank you, Ronnie. I have a question. So were there any public comments that were posted to the website like today?
We have one written comment concerning agenda item 6.1.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
If you could remind me,
Yes.
that'd be great. All right. So again, I'd like to welcome everybody, and we have a roll call.
Yes. Okay. All right. Director Arroyo? Present. Director Bauer, absent. Director Jorgensen, absent. Director Mobley?
Here.
Director Myers has joined remotely yet, does not appear so. Director Gagnon?
Here.
Director Scafani?
Here.
Director Schaefer?
Here.
Director Tuttle?
Here.
Director Wilson?
Here.
And Chair Wu?
Here. Thank you. Okay, so that was the roll call. It will just note, you'll just note in the minutes when when Director Myers shows up. I was gonna say Director Frankie, that's his name. So Director Myers. Okay. All right, so then that takes care of roll call. How about reports from member entities? Is there anybody from the board that like to report anything out? Natalie.
I attended the Redwood region. There was an economic conference last week, and I just wanted to give a big shout out to Matthew Marshall for a great presentation on the second day of the conference in the energy session, and appreciate that one of our biomass working group members also spoke really eloquently about biomass the previous day. So thank you for being there, and I know that people really benefited from that.
Okay, thanks. I will share from the water district that, we have our 2 megawatt hydro plant up at Ruth Lake, and we haven't been able to generate power because PG&E's substation is down. It was supposed to be down for like about 3 weeks, started in April. So we pretty much missed this whole big water year of generating power. And so then it kind of extended to 3 months. And now we heard that it might be fixed by the end of the year. And so this is a bummer for basically not just in general, because we could have been generating hydropower, but the the money that PG&E gives us when they buy the power goes straight to the munis, the ratepayers. So that's my report.
And maybe I'll follow up with John about kind of the actual sort of financial impacts of that, because I think that's something that to be reported, like, because it's not, you're not alone in this
Yeah.
issue. And I think, that's the kind of like factual impact that it's like, hey, this is not just trivial, like, oh, people are having trouble interconnecting, or PG&E doesn't have enough resources to do upgrades. It's like, that's, impactful.
I almost had that number in my head because it's 9 cents a kilowatt hour. And I almost had the amount of kilowatt hour that we did not, foregone. So thanks. That'd be great, Melanie. Anybody else? All right, moving on to oral communications. This is a time provided for people to address the board or submit written communications for things that are not on the agenda. And at the end of it, we can respond by making statements, but any request that requires action will have to be at a future meeting. So at this time, is there anybody in the public who would like to address the board?
We have no online comments. There was a written comment received, public comment that I believe was included in the agenda packet from Jesse Knoll in support of distributed solar, and Bob Road opposing biomass energy. And then we have a written in comment regarding agenda item 6.1 from Walter Paniak on biological effects of air pollution. And you could read his comments on the RCEA board webpage.
Thank you. All right, so that's it from online and in person. I'll move on to consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the board and were generally enacted in one motion. And there's no separate discussion of these things, but if we want to, we can have an item pulled or removed from the consent calendar, and then we could talk about it and consider it separately. At the end of the reading of this consent calendar, the board or members of the public can request that an item be removed. So I'll read them out. 4.1, approve minutes of August 24th, 2023 board meeting. 4.2, approve the disbursements report. 4.3, accept financial reports. 4.4, approve resolution 2023-8, approving and attesting to the veracity of the 2022 power source disclosure report and the power content label. 4.5, approve the attached update to the executive director salary range based on a midpoint of $267,000 effective July 1, 2023. Is there anybody first on the board who'd like to pull any of these items? I'd like to pull 4.1. Is there anybody from the public who'd like to pull anything off consent? Lori?
4.5.
4.5? All right. So is there anybody else like online?
No online.
Okay. Then how about, can we have a motion to approve 4.2, 4.3, and 4.4?
So moved. Second.
Do we want to do the all in favor, say aye with hands up, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, we can do that. So all in favor?
Can I have to do a roll call because you?
Oh, because
Oh,
ours is off.
that's
Okay.
right. I have not
You.
on yet, but you're, okay. Director Arroyo, you,
Yes.
Director Bauer absent, Director Jorgensen absent, Director Mobley,
Yes.
Director Myers is not joined us yet. Director Gagnon,
Yes.
Director Scafani,
Yes.
Director Schaefer,
Yes.
Director Tuttle,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
and Chair Wu.
Yes.
Can I confirm the motion and who made the motion and the second?
I made the motion.
Second Schaefer.
Thank you.
And it was for 4.2 through 4.5.
Four. Thank you.
Yes, I'll go first. I pulled 4.1 only because I think there's a typo on PDF page 10. And can find it. There was a part in there about, oh, my computer is. was the part where it says that I recused. It's under 8.2. And the first paragraph, Chair will recuse herself due to remote conflict of interest. And then blah, 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 about her employer, SHN engineers and geologists. Can you strike out power resources after that?
No.
And that's all I have on that. Anybody else? 4.1. And anybody from the public? 4.1. Nobody online?
Online.
Okay, great. Let's see here. I'm gonna hold that one. Let's do 4.5. Discuss that, and then we can have a motion to do 4.1 and 4.5 together. That work? 4.5 is approve the attached update to the executive director salary range based on a midpoint of $267,000 effective July 1, 2023. So first of all, how about from the board? Any comments, questions from the board?
Just a comment. I think it'd be helpful to just articulate the rationale for this. I think, the public would like to know. So,
Okay. Let's see here. Would we like to do that among directors, or would you like me to do it, or Matthew? Or
do you feel prepared to do it?
Lori told it, so.
I think it's fair to have you do it if you feel comfortable doing so.
Sure, I do feel comfortable doing so.
Great.
So we as in the board, have looked at the executive director salaries over the years, and we've always known that it has been low relative to people who are in his position, and it's called either executive director, general manager, sometimes they even call it CEO. But we've been looking and paying attention to these different energy agencies, and we knew that Matthew's salary was much less than the others. And we've just kind of been going along that. And then recently it came to my attention that it's possible that we could lose Matthew. And it was always possible. The thing that's happening right now in this arena, not just energy, but I mean, I'm in engineering, so I see it as well, that this deal of the remote work, it's a complete work disruptor. And we've already, I'm sure almost everybody in this room has some kind of anecdote about, hey, I know so-and-so who's working remotely, living up here in Humboldt County, but their job is in, say, San Diego, and they're making a whole lot more money because they're making San Diego wages, but living in Humboldt. So that has been a true disruptor, in my opinion, and I've, just seen it enough. So I asked the board whether we should address that, and that's what's in the packet. And we looked at comps. I think they're pretty solid comps. I think I looked at the what we knew about the experience of the other people that are in those comparable positions. And Matthew's experience is well above theirs in terms of number, not only in terms of number of years, but also in terms of the knowledge that he brings to this position. Now, if for any reason we lost Matthew due to, we always say, well, should I put in because he's run over by a bus or because he wins the lottery? And we usually choose because he wins the lottery and he leaves. We would have to fly a position like this at this salary range, this director salary, the range that's in the packet. And we would also, we as in the board, would have to grapple with the fact that we could very well have to have a remote director. So I think that given that, I was actually, I was happy to go ahead and put this packet together and to bring it to the board. And now it's out in the public. Yeah, go ahead now.
If I may make another comment from my perspective, while I very much appreciate our current executive director, For me, this was more about the position and ensuring that we're able to both retain and, if needed down the line, attract someone to the position that has comparable experience. And, you know, given the complexity of our organization and the size of our budget, this seemed like an appropriate range to me as well. And then just thinking through some of these comps, it's a little bit, not all of the information about the budget that is managed by these different comp agencies is included, but you know, that was something that I used in my thinking. So it's a little bit difficult to find comparable agencies because we are fairly unique, but I think this is not solely about retention, but also about ensuring that it's aligned with similar agencies so that if and when the time comes that we have to hire, we're in a position to do so.
Thanks, Nellie. Anybody else from the board? All right, then I will take it out to the public. So this time.
I'm Lori Biondini. I'm the Director of Business Planning and Finance here at RCEA. And for those of you who don't know me as well, I started working for RCEA in 2012 as a program assistant. And about a year later or so, I applied for an open energy specialist job and started managing some of RCEA's CEC grants. And in 2016, as our office manager was getting ready to retire, RCEA created a business manager position. I applied for that and stepped into that role and was around to help with RCEA's reorganization to get ready to grow into the role of CCA as well, as we took that on. And then in early 2019, I took over the Director of Finance role from the departing previous Director of Finance. I'll have a written comment, but I'd also like to read it.
May I pass this out?
So the report on item 4.5 of today's meeting agenda indicates that the comparable labor market for the executive director position was not identified and benchmarked as biennial salary survey conducted per the board adopted employee. In fact, it happened as detailed in the biennial salary survey of benchmark classifications that RCEA's labor market agencies included as attachment A to agenda item 10.1 in the May 25th, 2023 RCEA Board of Directors meeting agenda packet. This 2023 survey concluded that the average comparable midpoint for the executive director position was 38% over the pre-July 1st RCEA midpoint. However, the salary survey notes that the executive director individual benchmark classification was excluded when determining the average of the salary positions that were benchmarked. By excluding the executive director role, the average of benchmark classifications was determined to be about 12% more than the RCEA salaries at the time. The board approved a 14% increase for all positions, including the executive director, effective July 1, based on the Social Security cost of living adjustment and West Region Consumer Price Index percentage at the time. The board action increased the executive director's midpoint by 14%, which became effective July 1, 2023. Item 4.4 report also deviates from the approved labor market agencies that were surveyed in the 2023 biannual survey. It includes the 5 highest paid comparable positions to the RCEA director position from the survey, while it neglects to include the lowest 2 comparable positions. In the omission of those 2 lowest comparable salaries, the executive director midpoint rises from the 2023 survey average of $223,000 to the average presented in the item 4.5 report, $270,000. And then I've included a table that references the section of the survey as it was presented to the board in May of 2023. The resulting midpoint in the item 4.4 report of 270 equates to a 47% increase from the midpoint approved in May that went into effect July 1. Taking the 14% increase that was approved, plus the 47% increase currently being considered, this equates to a 67% increase from the pre-July 1, 161,000 midpoint. In summary, proposing to update the midpoint of any classification range salary schedule assumes that this process was used in the past to fairly determine individual classification increases, which it was not. It rather has been used as a justification for blanket cost of living increases across all classifications. Additionally, if singular classification adjustments are determined to be in line with the spirit of the current policy that's being referenced, then consider that the executive director role was actually included in the 2023 survey. The result was significantly less than the increase proposed by item 4.5. I'm asking the board to consider some following alternatives. The first, adjust the salary range of the executive director based on the average midpoint calculated in the comprehensive biennial salary survey of benchmark classifications that was conducted and presented to the board in May 2023. Number two, update the midpoints for all RCEA job classifications using a similar methodology of utilizing only the highest 5 benchmarks and making it retroactive to July 1. Or number three, eliminate the executive director class from the board adopted RCEA salary schedule and negotiate all executive director compensation via a contract amendment or some other process that's completely separate from the process in the board adopted employee compensation policy. In addition to my above concern about the process that was utilized to determine the recommended action for item 4.5, I also don't believe that the board has all the information needed to act on agenda 4.5 today. In past years, RCEA's general counsel has solicited input from RCEA employees, and in more recent years, just directors, when evaluating the executive director's performance and considering contract renewals or changes, which I think is invaluable to the health of the organization and the community. I believe it provides RCEA employees some confidence that not only the executive director, but the board that employs the executive director values those of us that make up this organization and that we have worthwhile input to inform these types of decisions.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public who'd like to speak on 4.5? Okay, and nobody online?
No online.
All right, I'm gonna take it back up to the board. So at this point, we have public comment. And is there any comment on 4.5 from the board? Hmm?
Oh, I mean,
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I'm just trying to give some air. I think there's some very fair points raised about, the methodology. I hear that, and I'm interested to hear what other people think about some of the ideas presented. I think that it raises some good questions. The comment that was made, and I appreciate that. I am interested in exploring and hearing thoughts about either the third option of pulling this from the the general salary schedule and discussing it as a separate item, or possibly updating the midpoints. So items 2 and 3 on that list. Just wondering what others think.
I'll lay it out there just because I've been pretty close to this topic. I don't, well, it's like bullet points, but if we number them 1, 2, 3 on Lori Biandini's memo, to eliminate the ED class from the salary schedule, I thought of that too. And that we could just go straight to contract negotiations. And that was one of the things I was thinking about early on.
we like the transparency of having it the way it is, but I'm totally open to whatever the board thinks.
I'm looking at Nancy's face and guessing that since this wasn't on the agenda in this way, we probably would want to talk about it later. Is that?
No.
Okay.
I just wanted to weigh in on that last point.
Okay.
And I can wait till you're done.
I'm done.
Okay.
In fact, I'm done because I'd rather hear what you say.
So if RCEA were a PERS agency, it would have to be a classification schedule, because PERS is now requiring that. My experience, which, with public agencies, which is an embarrassing long time, is that it is very awkward to have a salary schedule negotiated every year. And, every year, what is the increase going to be? Well, let's see. I can only give 3% to my agency, which is a non-comparable agency, but therefore I'm only going to approve 3% here. So I have found over the years with other agencies that the absence of an objectively approved schedule with, step increases is very, very, very cumbersome and difficult to deal with on an annual evaluation basis. On merit, you would evaluate the ED as to whether the ED has performed appropriately and is entitled to a step increase, just as the ED evaluates all of the employees. And that's the same, I think that's the same objective process that should be applied. So that's my only comment to number 3. It's not required because RCEA is not a PERS agency.
I'm not sure I understood what, so.
We could do that, but it's not as transparent as other similar public agencies that are non-PERS.
Okay.
And the trend is that the trend I'm seeing is that it's just becoming more and more and more routine for
To do the salaries.
to embed the top executive into the salaries.
Okay, gotcha.
Because it's objective. And then the actual issue before the board is whether or not the employee is entitled to the step increase.
Gotcha.
Can I ask again, the rationale for separating it out, was that because it skews the statistics of the rest of the salary schedule? Or is there a?
To me, well, I don't know if you guys remember, I mean, Frank, I'm sure, and there was some other, Nancy for sure, and others might have been on board then. Seems like it's pulled out because the comps are so different.
Okay.
It's not what?
The comparable salaries for the ED position are so different than the other directors and all the other staff.
Why it's not pulled out?
Why it is pulled out.
Why it is pulled out? It is extremely different than the other agencies, and the other agencies, in some cases, are a lot larger, but they're not as complex. I don't think. I'm not there to sit through all their thing, but we have a rather complex system in order to make this work in a rural community.
Just budget wise, Sonoma Clean Power is the only one that's really larger than us. So the rest are smaller than us.
Anybody else from the board? Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
So I just want to check my understanding. It's really my understanding that this is an increase based on what similarly situated positions are being paid across the state. And when I look at the comps, the Sonoma Clean Power jumps out because it is really a similarly situated entity. It's a CCA. They do a lot of the same kinds of aggressive and ambitious programs that RCEA does. RCEA just was successful at getting over $170 million statewide rural REN program, in addition to its core operations and the CCA operations. This is a big entity. It's as Director Wilson said, is complex. So so I think I would be in favor of approving this increase based on those two buckets. That it's the complexity is what the comparables are meant to address, and that the Republican Party, thanks to its team, has been extraordinarily successful in its role in our region. I do think that number two, or the second bullet that we were talking about, update the midpoints, CA job classifications. I know that the board just went salary adjustments of almost, I don't know, a few months ago. Time ceases to have all losing meaning for me. But my recommendation would be to go back and have staff go back and look at that, updating the midpoints to make sure that the formulas that we're using are equitable across the board.
Any other, okay.
I think that seems reasonable. I can understand, I understand the case being made for the, I can see why we wouldn't use these smaller local districts as comps for the position, but why for certain positions they might be appropriate comps, because those might be similar skill sets for some of our personnel. So it's tricky, but in the interest of fairness, I think that's a good plan to bring that back and see what that would look like, and how we might be able to accommodate that. And I think it's a little bit tricky to provide the direction, because I don't think it's really appropriate to put our staff in that position. Do you know why I mean that? Because I mean, if it could just be as simple as bullet point number 2 here, update the midpoints across the board and bring that back and see what that looks like. But I would say if we're going to ask for that, to just, I would say we're not really asking staff to provide us with a recommendation just with the information, because providing a recommendation around that is inherently probably fairly awkward, as we just kind of went through this. But I'm on board with that too.
Well, I would like it, one of the things that about the second bullet point about using only the highest 5 benchmarks. It's not about using the highest 5 benchmarks or the lowest or the mid. It's about using the most comparable ones. And I can tell you right now that for Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District, at the general manager position there is not similar to our ED position here. For one thing, we know exactly where the molecules of water are coming from. We don't do any procurement. They kind of come from the Mad River. We don't do any of that. The kind of programs we do are fairly straightforward nowadays. It's kind of based on old physics. We pump water around and we clean it up. And, the grants that we get are it's super rare if a grant is over 5 million. They're mostly like in the 2 million maybe range. So our capital projects are much less. Our whole revenue, if you look at the revenue on an annual basis, it's much less. So to me, it seems comparable actually, when I'm looking at what the GM of Humboldt Bay Water District makes. It seems about right to me. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't like this utilizing only the highest 5 benchmarks. I think it has to be. And maybe this is where the board does come in on a policy level of deciding what are the comparable benchmarks that we want to use for staff, if we want to get into that.
Is it possible for me to make another comment?
No, actually. I don't want this to be a back and forth.
At this point, board, do we have direction for staff? Do we have any motions? You know what we should do? How about, I'm gonna go back on what I said. Do we have anything on, do we want to approve 4.1 separately?
I would make a motion to approve 4.1 and 4.5. And I think we can go back and look at the other stuff or add it to a future agenda item.
Yeah, that is a motion on the table.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you want to do both of them at once or?
Well, at first I thought we would do that, but now I'm taking it back because 4.1, I'm thinking is
It's a lot less.
It's a lot less. I'm pretty sure that's a yes, because I corrected the typo. So that's why I'm saying we can do 4.1. Then if we do 4.5 as is, that's great. We could do 4.5 as a motion with other verbiage added in.
You have a motion on the tables.
You have a motion on the.
So, but I didn't hear a second.
I don't feel ready to.
All right, that one's gonna die.
I'll second it.
Oh, okay. So the motion, let me say it back to everybody, is to approve 4.1 and 4.5 as they are in the consent calendar on the agenda. Yeah. We have a motion and a second.
Take a vote. Director Arroyo,
Can I ask a clarifying question of our attorney first before I vote?
Mhm.
If I vote no, are we able to go back and separate them out? Okay, great. No.
all right, Director Bauer absent, or yes, Director Jorgensen absent, Director Mobley,
Yes.
Director Myers has joined us,
No.
Director Gagnon,
Yes.
Director Scapani,
Yes.
Director Schaefer,
No.
Director Tuttle,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
and Director Wu.
Yes.
Motion has not passed.
It's not passed.
That's,
All right. I can't make motions.
you know what?
Yeah.
Wrong. I said it's wrong.
No, but I think as chair, I can't, right? I mean, that's how we do it. Water district.
You didn't make the motion.
No, I'm asking for it. So I am going to ask for a motion.
I think
Wait,
it-
no,
Oh, I thought she said it didn't pass.
Do math. Yes, so
Okay,
this motion.
okay. All right, it did pass.
On that.
Okay,
you could have further discussion on,
really, it's done.
Oh, okay.
Finality says it's done unless somebody,
Future agenda items.
there you go.
unless, yeah, somebody who voted in favor of it makes a motion to reconsider. You could reconsider it immediately if somebody who voted in favor of it makes that motion.
could bring it to number 11.
Okay,
So what is the end result of what we're doing here?
If
We passed it, and one ties in with motion
4.1 and
4.1 and 4.5 are tied together and they pass.
yes.
That's what I thought.
we're done with the consent calendar.
Okay, ready? Okay, remove from consent calendar, we did that. CCE business, and we have a quorum, right? Okay, let's move on to old CCE businesses. I'm 6.1. We're gonna have a presentation on public health impacts of biomass energy on nearby population.
Good afternoon, I'm Richard Engel, Director of Power Resources, and I'm just going to preface this very quickly and get out of the way so Dr. Stockton can give you the main attraction. As you know, we've been hearing a lot from community members with concerns about greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution from the biomass plant that we buy some of our power from. And today we're just focusing on the actual air pollutants, this presentation of gas emissions. This is not something that has to do with like a near-term decision that we're asking the board to make about procurement. It's just background information to be better informed on the topic. Questions answered that have been coming up in previous board meetings. I will mention though, in keeping with our strategic plan, that we are monitoring a CPUC proceeding called Biomass, the Bioenergy Market Adjusting Tariff. which aligns with some of the strategies, bioenergy section of our strategic plan. So it's likely that we'll be coming to the board in the not too distant future as that proceeding completes. And what will happen is the community choice aggregators will start to have the ability to procure energy at market cost through that program, just as current utilities are currently able to do. So I think the more informed that the board is on implications of bioenergy, the better move into that. So we invited Dr. Candy Stockton, the county's public health officer, to talk to you about the health impacts of biomass energy plants on nearby populations. And this was partly, driven by comments that have come from Dr. Wendiering, who's spoken to the board and submitted numerous comments on this topic. And we just really wanted to, bring some daylight on that from somebody who's better qualified to talk to you about it than RCEA staff are. But I will just say that staff do take seriously air quality concerns associated with our power procurement. So we definitely want to look for a path forward on that. And we have been closely engaged with the Air Management District also to just get their perspectives on this. Just as we talked about before, we've started planning for a project that's somewhat inspired by some work that the Shots Energy Center did with the Yurok Tribe in a couple of years to do some local ambient air quality monitoring. And we talked a little bit with Dr. Stockton about that, and she's offered to give us some pointers on that. I think that will help us design a useful effort on that. Without any further ado, I will step aside and let Dr. Stockton speak with you. And thank you for coming in.
Hi, thank you for having me today. Thank you. I'll just pop up when I. All right, they will just pop up. Excellent. So I'm Candy Stockton. I am the health officer for the county. I'm also a long-term member of this community. I was born here in the old Eureka General Hospital, moved away for my training and early career, and have been back for about 6 years now. 4 generations of my family make their homes here. So I feel very invested in this community. I am not here to make a case for or against any particular type of energy. I realize that there are pros and cons, costs and benefits of every decision that we make. My role is actually to share with you some of the consequences of some of those decisions so that you can weigh that in your decision-making process when you're doing that. I also recognize that when we talk science, we get really big, right? And that can result in complicated, difficult to wrap your head around long-term predictions, long-term things that leave open a lot of room for arguing about, well, how much of that is really related to this or how much is really related to that. So we've chosen to actually bring a much more focused, direct, concrete approach of the shorter term, more direct implications of exposure to biomass energy plants so that it's real in a way that we sort of lose when we start talking about, long-term down the road, multiple complex steps of secondary, tertiary, and quaternary effects of those things. So we're going to be focusing really just on the primary, concrete, near-term effects. So 2 main types of biomass and biomass pollution, we use direct combustion or fermentation. Actually, both plants seem to emit fairly similar levels of particulates and gases and volatile compounds. So for all intents and purposes, when we're looking at study material, they seem to be comparable between those 2 types of plants. We don't necessarily need to specify between the 2. We actually have great epidemiologists on our staff who went through into the literature review looking for information that was specific to biomass plants. There is a lot of literature out there around particulate pollutants in the air and the long-term health effects. So I don't want to ignore that or negate that. But again, trying to really bring this home and concrete our area, what we're talking about, we really looked for what was comparable to us. So there's a study out of Taiwan that really, because the base populations we were looking at had so many different demographic characteristics, so many different characteristics in the healthcare system and other things, it made that study not really reflective or transferable to what we're looking at. There's a study out of Denmark that actually, again, looked at different factors and didn't seem very, very comparable. But there is a great study out of New York that looked at the impacts on local populations who lived around biomass plants there. They looked at
I'm going to be slightly off. I think there's a dozen or 15 different biomass plants in the area. The demographics of the populations in that area and the main structure of the healthcare system are pretty similar to what we're experiencing here. So it's a very comparable population without a lot of the confounding factors when we look at studies that are done in other countries. And these studies all looked at the short-term or near-term respiratory outcomes associated with this. This is one of the main complications that we recognize from exposure to pollution. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that when there's a lot of smoke in the air, it's hard to breathe. Like we all kind of recognize that there's a connection between those things. And then one of the questions that we're often asked is, what about cancer or death or long-term outcomes? There are complicated modeling programs that can equate risk to all those things and plug them into and spit out a number. And I do believe that those numbers are actually probably pretty accurate. But I also recognize that those happen in a black box. They're not easy to understand. There's a lot of room for arguing that other factors might influence those outcomes. And it's not easy to do a, 75-year longitudinal study of people who live near power plants or live near power plants at some point in their life to actually really look at that data. And so the studies we're looking at are looking at shorter term or near term respiratory outcomes specifically. And we really don't have this kind of study about long-term, decreased life expectancy, cancer rates, and other things. It's reasonable to expect that there's some level of decrease in those things with long-term exposure. But I think that unless you already buy into that idea, it's very easy to argue with any of the modeling systems that punch out those numbers for us. So again, chosen to stick with the more concrete. So again, similar population in the US, very biased based on the fact that they looked at outcomes classified off of emergency room visits for those symptoms. So these are not somebody saying after the fact, yeah, I think I had a hard time breathing last year. This is actually counted specific ER room visits for respiratory symptoms. And it helps us kind of understand this relationship between exposure and outcomes. We also saw that when you look at the AeroMod modeling of the different pollutant levels for the averages in the New York exposures versus what our modeling here shows, they're very similar numbers. So again, it's not a lot of room to argue that this is different than what our population is experiencing. This study actually did take steps to control for some of the confounders such as age, race, sex, county smoking levels, those types of things, because they did look at a number of plants across New York. It wasn't a single plant in the study. So this is what we found. We found that living within 10 kilometers of a plant emitting these particulate matters is associated with a higher risk of lower respiratory diseases. That's your asthma, bronchitis, stuff that's not your cold or allergies, upper respiratory stuff, COPD. Found a significant association between those conditions and having emergency room visits for flares of symptoms for those conditions. And that's significant because many of you may know this. You may live with mild asthma yourself. It's not really a problem unless the fires are acting up or you're hanging out in a room with somebody who's smoking. But for a lot of people who have moderate persistent asthma or chronic bronchitis, that those symptoms can impact their life on a daily basis. And every one of those emergency room visits is a potential for death for individuals who are affected by this. Also, we know that in our area, not everybody has really good access to medical care or emergency room visits. So it is something that we worry about from a public health perspective. And they did find that in this study that their risk was highest within 5 kilometers, that there was an increased rate within a 5 to 10 kilometer range, and that outside of 10 kilometers, you didn't see that immediate short-term increase effect. Does that mean there's no long-term effect? No, that's just much harder to demonstrate. And when you're looking at this over the 5-year period that was studied, outside of that range, we didn't find a measurably different level of short-term outcomes associated with exposure. So what does that mean for us? We have just under 4,000 residents living within that distance range of the biomass plant in our county. And if we look at, again, our air mod pollution rates versus those out of the New York State study, you can see that ours are quite similar, very slight variations, but very similar to those. In the New York populations that were studied, and there was hundreds of thousands of people studied, we saw approximately 12.3% of the individuals actually developed this level of requiring emergency room visits for symptoms associated with exposure to the plant. And if you apply that to our local population, that means that we would expect 474 individuals, about 12.3% of our population living within that affected range, to have an emergency room visit related to lower respiratory symptoms over a 5-year period. So it's not, you know, every single day or every week. But what that means is an average of 94 incidents per year, 7 to 8 emergency room visits for respiratory symptoms per month. It's not, oh my God, stop everything right now, we're all dying. But it is significant. It's medically significant for the families that are involved. It's medically significant for the healthcare system to absorb those visits. And it underestimates the actual effect of illness because it's only those times, it's only counting those times that are significant enough that it leads those individuals to go to the emergency room. So this is going to be an underestimate of the impact that it has on the local community. We know that with really small populations that you're going to see a lot of fluctuation. So when you average statistics out over populations of hundreds of thousands of people, those rates tend to be pretty steady. When you put them in really small populations, they can jump a lot and drop a lot from month to month or week to week. And that would be really hard to, I'm not going to say that like every month there are 7 people that show up for this, but that's what it would average out to over a 5-year period. Again, it underestimates the effect on the community because it's only counting those cases that are significant enough to result in emergency room intervention. And we do know that there is some overlap that in general, high income, high resource families don't live really close to power plants. So there is some overlap with the socioeconomic contributors to health that can make dealing with some of these illnesses worse than they might be for the rest of us. So if I have to pay $150 out of pocket this month to get my kid's rescue inhaler because my insurance didn't kick in for whatever reason, it's not the end of the world for me. It's a much different picture for somebody, particularly the people who are going to be more economically disadvantaged, who are living within the immediate vicinity of that area. So that is something to keep in mind when we talk about the effects. It's not equitably distributed. And that again, reminding that we can't really easily point to those longer term impacts that we have, but we do know that for individuals with asthma, COPD, chronic bronchitis, depending on your disease diagnosis and your level of illness and level of control, that shortens your life expectancy anywhere from about 3.5 to 10 years, which is not insignificant for the individuals involved. And given that the average life expectancy for a man in the US right now is 73, I think. If we have any 63-year-old men in the room, I'm going to ask you, like, is 10 years a significant decrease in life expectancy? Kind of feels like it. And then and we know that it also affects absenteeism and sleep for children. And I think coming out of 3 years of pandemic, we all understand how important it is for kids to be in their supportive environments. And we also understand that when kids are missing school, parents are missing work. We know that for adults who are affected by these diseases, they have a higher incidence of absenteeism at work as well, and lower earned income potential over time because of that. So again, I want to just kind of lay those out in perspective. This is not, there are worse things we do. We get in our car and drive every day, right? We do these things. I don't want to be like, this is the end of the world. But I also would like you to be aware that when we're talking about the public health impacts, these are real people. These are measurable effects. These are really, concrete numbers that we can wrap our heads around. And this is the cost. So whatever we're getting out of it needs to be worth that cost, or we need to look at another methodology that doesn't cost us as much. Or we need to invest in ways to mitigate the cost for those individuals who are affected by that outcome. That really is kind of the point that I would like to drive home. I am not, again, advocating for any specific source of energy or thereof, but I do think that it's helpful to have this information in mind when you are making decisions for our community. And with that, do you have any questions?
Anybody from the board?
So I'm wondering, thinking about the area, thinking about wind patterns, thinking about a lot of things, if some of these statistics are corrected for distance and terrain and wind,
So
and how that affects specifically Rio Dell.
Yes, it's a great question. So I actually reached out to our local weather service to get information about that because I had that same question. And the answer is, as I understand it, not a weather specialist, so forgive me if I convey this incorrectly, but because of the river valley setup and the way that the temperature changes over the course of the day, about half the time the wind is blowing from Scotia to Rio Dell, and about half the time it's blowing from Rio Dell to Scotia. And looking at the number of plants that were involved in the New York study, there's nothing very specifically unusual about ours. So there's no like prevailing wind pattern that blows the pollutants away from Rio Dell that would offset that risk. Again, not a weather specialist, but I did specifically reach out to our local National Weather Service representative to get that information.
Interesting. Thank you.
I'm just curious.
We're not to public comment yet.
Yeah, we'll do that though. First we'll do the board.
Okay.
And then we go out to the public. So let's finish the board first. Anybody else from the board? Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Just one brief comment. I really want to thank you for this information and for the work that you did to craft it. This is not an easy topic to get arms around. We know from experience, and thank you for including the studies and the all the other information that is now in front of us in our packets.
You are welcome. And also, I cannot take full credit for this. I'd like to introduce Mohammed Ahmedin, who's our epidemiologist at the county and who did all of the research work to pull all this together. I waited to introduce him to make sure that there wasn't going to be a lot of negative feedback for fire. So I'd very much like him to stay. But yeah, he did an amazing work actually going through this, and he's relatively new out of training in Tulane and got a lot of extra support from us from the supervising epidemiologist that he's worked with previously. So this is like really top of the line information for which I cannot claim responsibility.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Okay, anybody else from the board before I take it out to the public? Okay, I think we have one person in the public who would like to speak. Would you mind coming to the podium? Only because that way the people online can hear you. Thank you.
My question to you is it safe to assume that when there is, you were talking about wind currents, but when there's an inversion layer, when it's fog inevitably sets in, there's probably even higher concentrations. Possibly is it safe to assume that?
Yeah, so I would say not an expert in this field, but it would be safe to assume that at given times over the course of the week, year, month, whatever, there are higher and lower levels. The beauty of this kind of study, though, is that it actually looked at those levels and the exposure over a continuous 5-year period. So it's going to sort of self-correct for weather fluctuations unless, I don't know, like 5 years of straight hurricanes in New York or something like that. But yeah, it does self-correct for that kind of variation in weather.
Cool, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public in person? All right, I'll take it out to the public online. Is there anybody?
We have no online. We did have that written in specific to this agenda item, which we already said, but bears repeating, I think. We received written comment from Walter Paniak on the biological effects of air pollution, and you can read his comments on RCEA webpage.
Oh, that does bring up a topic that was not in my presentation, but I think I did not communicate with Richard entirely accurately. So I am not qualified to provide guidance around the design of the study of the air mod. What I suggested is that we actually get Cal Poly and the environmental scientists involved because there are a lot of intricacies and complications. And we want to make sure that any data that we do get out of that is actually useful and that we understand what it means. And so I have offered to help facilitate that connection, but don't want to pass myself off as the expert who's qualified to actually give study design advice around that.
Go ahead, Jen.
One more comment just to that point. When we were dealing with this at Lake Rancheria, it was important to understand that when you're capturing air quality data, if you want it to be a part of compliance and monitoring compliance regulatory schemes, it needs to be reference grade, what they call reference grade.
Yeah.
So, I'm wondering what your how the Air District has not sort of
Yeah, I can't, but that was actually part of my concern as well, is that we understand exactly what we're looking for, that the equipment that we're using to find that is the right equipment to identify what we're looking for. Because it is easy to design and this is, healthcare is plagued with this, so it's everywhere. It's easy to design a common sense study that sounds good, that falls apart because the sensitivity of your testing equipment wasn't good enough to capture it. You were looking for the wrong thing, or you made an incorrect, kind of base assumption or hypothesis that you based your study off of. I have no knowledge of what's currently planned. I have only recently joined the advisory board. And at that meeting, there was reference to possibly pursuing this kind of study. And I jumped in and said that I would really like for us to be involved in that process if that's happening. So we would really like the opportunity to make sure that whatever we learn from it is, well, that it's worth doing, that we can learn something from it, and that we understand what we learned from it and what we didn't learn from it, what the limitations are. But I'm not qualified to speak to what the plans are. And I apologize, I'm actually just very new to the advisory group on this process. So still getting up to speed on some of the previous plans.
No, I think just really want to thank the team. Richard, thanks for bringing this information up. And just as far as I understand it, the Air District locally, CARB, the California Air Resources Board, EPA, others have the reference grade equipment that they can deploy in regions like this. I know that the tribal air program at University of Arizona has equipment that it can deploy too. So happy to follow that up if it's useful. But again, I just really want to thank you for this important information.
Okay, anybody else from the board? Oh, go ahead, Ellen.
I wasn't totally following the discussion about a study design with Cal Poly Humboldt. Are we in the process of working with them to design a study?
I think I'm getting in over my pay grade, not to acknowledge. So once again, I walked into a room, we mentioned a study. I said, that's great. If we're going to do that, let's make sure we've designed it appropriately from the ground up. Who could be local partners on that? Cal Poly was one that I suggested. I'm in the process of reaching out to see if they have staffing that are qualified and interested. But to the best of my knowledge, there is no currently planned and proposed study that has progressed through development that has actually agreed upon partners. And I hope I'm not misspeaking.
No, that's correct. And so, something that came up in this discussion was sort of is there sort of a citizen science or some way to kind of enhance the data available so that's, it's not speculative to kind of say okay, well, what is actually going on? And, and what is that, can we improve the data available? It's sort of at the conceptual stage right now. There was some work that some of the tribes and Cal Poly has done around sort of air quality monitoring, mostly focused on forest fires and other issues. And so we were like, well, could we do something similar here? But it's, it's a concept now. It's not like a project. And I think it would be funded by RCEA if we did move forward. But
Great. I just had a follow up to that, which is that I'm sure you know very well about our community health improvement plan.
A little bit.
Kind of your overarching document centering the work of public health right now. But the Live Well Humboldt group is in the process of forming, and I'm participating in these meetings to kind of talk about the tracking and implementation of that community health improvement plan, which is a 5-year plan for the county to address public health concerns. I would say respiratory illness is not one of those priority areas, but what is adverse childhood experiences, which includes an environmental health component. So I would be happy to take to the group the idea of, and one of the questions for the group is what kind of data should we include in this community dashboard, and what are good sources, and where, what should we be looking at? And for community partners who have experience with all levels of work around the county to weigh in on that. And so I would be happy to bring to that group the idea of tracking over time the information that would be relevant to this topic as a portion of, through the lens of preventing adverse childhood experiences and environmental exposure for youth, but it really serves everyone. But I might need to just, if that's, something that seems like useful information to bring back over time and to have access to, which certainly seems to me like it would be, then maybe I can work with you on what are the parameters that I should recommend that we look at.
Interestingly, I'm involved in the Live Well Humboldt development as well. Yeah, I would be happy to talk about it. This is an area where I would love to have more information. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I do worry a little bit about kids who live in proximity to this space. And, and we know when families are under-resourced, when they're dealing with poverty and those types of things, that parents don't have a lot of emotional energy to always chase everything else down entirely. It's not because they're bad parents or bad people. It's just so much of their energy is tied up in survival. And I will tell you that I, as a physician, was planning a trip out of the country. I have adult children now, but my kids were little at one point, and I have a son who has asthma and reactive airway disease. And I was planning a trip out of the country on a medical relief mission to Haiti after the big earthquake down there. And my son was acting just a little bit sick. And because my husband's not great about connecting with the doctor, I decided to take them both in together before I left, just to make sure everything that was good. And my son was actually in the middle of a severe asthma flare with an oxygen levels down in the low 80s and ended up being admitted to the hospital. And I actually, as a trained medical professional parent, didn't necessarily recognize that was happening, because I was, in part, it's not always easy to see from the outside, in part because I was a little distracted by other stressors in my life at that time. And so I do worry about families that are not well resourced with kids that are being exposed to things that are increasing their risk of asthma, because their families may not have the capability to even recognize and get the care for them in the first place, so that we even can count them as statistics. But yeah, I'd be happy to contribute that. And I don't want to monopolize your meeting today, so I feel like I'm talking too much. Thank you so much for having me. Oh, go ahead.
Could we curtail the biomass plant when particle levels got to a certain level? Where
actually, this is not, I want to kind of cap it off on talking about the plant. You're talking about the Humboldt Sawmill Company.
Right.
Because this is not on the agenda.
Okay.
Right? Is that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Because a bunch of other things have to happen if we wanted to do that.
I'm not.
I would have to leave the room, and anyway, it would just be like, so let's not do that.
Wanted to ask me, but I would say that from my presentation, one of the things I would say is that, we would look at the cost of the things that we're doing, and we look at, do we have the ability to change or mitigate that? So I would think that anytime we're looking at any type of energy, that's not the right word, sorry, but acquiring any kind of energy, or anytime I'm acquiring a resource for public health or anything else, that is one of the things I think about as we're doing that planning process is, what is the cost of this to the community, and is it inequitably distributed to certain people, and how can I mitigate that? So how can I get my COVID vaccines to the people who are most at risk of death? How can I make sure that we have STI treatment available for those people who have least access to healthcare? So I think that there is a role to talk about mitigation in the issue, and I am completely unqualified to provide any kind of feedback on how you operate the plant.
One question you could answer. So the AccuWeather that you got from August 17th to the 6th, did you have any local fires in the area that were affecting the air quality at the time?
The AeroMod modeling that we looked at? Yeah. I would have to go back and look. I think that's actually over a period of a range of time that reports. I cannot give you the specifics of that right now. I'd be happy to follow up with that information so that you can circulate it.
I just noticed it was a really bad air quality in my area.
Definitive answers to things I don't actually know the answer to. I'm guessing I believe that it's a long span of time, and so it's kind of irrelevant. But again, I don't know that for sure, and I'll follow up with the information.
Anybody else from the board? All right. Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you. Okay, that was 6.1. We're on 6.2, the biannual update, the strategic plan. It's 4:40. So,
while I'm grabbing the clicker, I just want to thank our county colleagues for stepping into this, and it was not on their work plan for the year, I think, and so very much appreciate that, and also Richard and his staff for kind of trying to dive into this and address the board's questions and concerns and build a knowledge base. So thank you. And also thank you, Richard and Joseph and Jocelyn.
okay, item 6.2 is page 61, our packet.
Yeah, and I'll try to go through this briskly so that we can keep on schedule. But, as I think you all know, we committed when we adopted the strategic plan to doing a twice a year kind of update. The beginning of the year one being a little bit more in depth, and then kind of a check-in, at sort of the 6-month approximate timeframe. And so I'll just provide some quick updates of what's been going on for the first half of the year. And just as a refresher, our strategic plan is, broken into sort of 4 categories. As far as regional planning coordination, integrated demand side management, which is sort of the wonky industry term for energy efficiency programs, customer programs, low carbon transportation, and then energy generation utility services, which is the CCE program. And there's increasing overlap between these different categories. So while, we had to put stuff down on 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, a lot of them are becoming more and more of a Venn diagram of hey, your car could help balance the grid. And, there's more and more overlap between these things. So on the planning front, the goals, just as a refresher, is, achieving net zero emissions by 2030, and becoming an energy secure community by 2030. And that's really about, having the capabilities and infrastructure to address energy emergencies and disruptions. And then building the clean energy sector as a cornerstone of the local economy, and that is everything from, installing heat pumps to microgrids to offshore wind. And so those are the big picture goals. The things that we've been working on, we've continued to partner with the county and the cities on the regional climate action plan effort. That's been sort of a multi-year sort of plugging along effort, but there's been some forward movement there. We've been looking at grant opportunities and have submitted some for energy resilience, both planning as well as actual infrastructure. So, solar battery storage for fire stations, those kinds of things. And so trying to see if there's funding opportunities there. We've continued to work with Core Hub, particularly in the realm of offshore wind development and kind of the community benefits part of that, of how hopefully large economic opportunity of offshore wind can be maximized for local benefits, and not just kind of, something where we're exporting power, but the jobs aren't here. And then, one on the planning front was we had the sort of first inaugural round of the Humboldt Electric Future Planning process, which, you've heard reports from Richard on, and that's really trying to kind of bring more community input into our integrated resource planning process that we have to do every 2 years, or we have to update every 2 years. And so using the sort of interim years for the formal filing to gather community input. So this is the first year we're going to do that. And then hopefully in future years, we'll kind of grow that process of community input, that state planning process. On the customer energy solutions, customer programs side, the goals are really to support widespread installation of customer solar, reaching 30 megawatts by 2025. And we're pretty well on track for that, and 50 megawatts by 2030, providing energy efficiency and conservation services, to making that available to basically every household and business that wants it, and working to reduce natural gas consumption in the county, as far as from a greenhouse gas perspective. And then, again, this is one of those sort of overlapping ones, deploying microgrids and renewable backup power systems, depends on what you call a microgrid. Those are kind of the same thing, for emergency energy supply at all of the critical facilities in the county. And so that's something that Dana and his team have been working on, kind of refining that list. And we've been working with the community advisory committee on refining, what are the critical facilities? It's not just police stations, it's also grocery stores and, and other, it doesn't necessarily have to be public infrastructure to be a critical facility. And so on the customer programs front, in June, we wrapped up just a little bit below $2 million CPUC funded energy efficiency program cycle that we've been working on for 3 years. As part of the annual budget, the board did approve some incentive programs to kind of cover the gap between the end of that program and the launch of the Rural Regional Energy Network funding. And so we're able to kind of continue to provide services to customers throughout the fall. Our PG&E contract, our local government partnership contract with PG&E, which provides sort of technical assistance, focused a lot on public agencies and referrals to other programs. That has, we just sort of kicked off an extension of that for another 2.5 years with another $1 million of funding, began this summer. And then the Rural Regional Energy Network funding was approved by the CPUC a couple weeks ago. And just as a reminder about that program, we've talked about it, but RCEA is the program administrator for kind of really a 4-region program, which it's the launch will be in 2024. And then there's a first round with $84 million and then preliminary authorization for another $93 million for 2028 through 31. And so a lot of that funding is not for Humboldt County. We're sort of serving the North Coast region and then passing through funds to other regions. But a big statewide effort. And on the utility side of things, as you know, we set the goal of getting to the state's target of 100% clean and or renewable sources. So really that comes down to hydropower and or things that are eligible renewable sources by 100% by 2025. And then with the goal of by 2030 being a net exporter of renewable electricity. And there's some nuances to how much of the power we're, if offshore wind gets built out, how much are we like putting into our own portfolio versus exporting versus are we importing power? So I think that's something that we'll want to talk about of sort of exactly how we define that 100% local goal, because we might have way more electricity being generated than we're using locally, but we might have a portfolio that doesn't necessarily, on paper include that. And then again, part of this is really to also integrate being able to respond to disruptions and, kind of integrate resilience into this, not just kind of have it be about the power content label, but to be about local resilience. So we have a new solicitation out to help meet some of our goals. And that's something that, was talked about with the board, but that's kind of an open season where, we can get proposals on an ongoing basis. As we've talked a lot about, our solar and storage projects that are in the pipeline are moving forward, but we've had a lot of the supply chain issues, and particularly the Sandrini solar project, which is like 40% of our power load or something like that, has had delays, which have been, impactful on our financial outlook, but they are moving forward. And so it's like this is our power content label. So I'm going to show you some pictures about Sandrini before we get to that, which are kind of like bittersweet. Soon everyone will be getting in the mail the postcard that we have to send out to all of our customers every year, which has the like sort of state required power content label. And so this will be for 2022, and we send it out this time of year after it's been verified. And so, the bottom line there is a little bit small. You'll get it in your mailbox so you can look at it in detail. But the red bar is, the graph is emissions. And so the red bar is the statewide California utility average. The blue bar is our standard offering, which is, as you can see, quite a bit below as far as emissions. And this is, we don't design the methodology. We have to follow the state's methodology. So whether we like it or not, we use the state methodology. And then our Repower Plus 100% renewable option, which is small hydro, solar, and wind, is 0. So you can't see the green bar because there is no green bar. And so, our power content label for our base offering, was 50% renewable and 45% large hydro, and then 5% mystery meets spam power from the grid, which, was above what we had actually aimed for. And we have to balance kind of procurement versus what actual load comes in at. So sometimes we come in a little bit better. And so overall power content wise, towards that 100% renewable and or emissions free, we were at 95% for 2022. So close to 100. This year might be a little bit of a dip down because of financials, but and just the availability of resources to buy it. But and so the good and the bad pictures. So this is the Sandrini project. So on the left side there are the power lines bringing it to the broader grid. So the big tall ones are new power lines being put in for our 100 megawatt solar project. And so that's been completed. This is the new substation that's going to provide the power. So that's all done. So the transmission and substation is ready to go. And here's a picture of the solar array. And so that's it's a tracking system, so it can rotate. And so as you can see, there's something missing, which is the solar panels. So they've installed all of the racking, and this is where the challenge has been, is because they already had begun that work when the rules changed and they said, oh, you've got to send you got to get qualified panels. And so they've been struggling to find panels, and part of the constraint is they can't just put any panel on these tracking system that's already been installed. It has to be compatible, and so they're limited in the options. We have heard that they did sort of a test batch of panels because they didn't want to send another boatload of panels into Long Beach and then have them be sent back. But they have gotten like customs approval for like a manufacturer. So I think we're getting close to having hopefully an actual like timeline of like, all right, here's an approved panel. It's gonna be able to start being produced and sent to attach to that. And so if you wonder what oops, too far. That's a 100 megawatt solar project without the solar panels. So there's a lot of racking and a lot of trackers and waiting for the panels. So hopefully we'll be able to do a ribbon cutting, and maybe we'll have a board field trip down there because it's a large project and it's like almost there. And so that's where it's not that it hasn't been progressing, but it's just been this issue with the panels. And so hopefully we'll get over this hurdle, and then it'll be producing quite a lot of renewable power for the next 20 years. So. And then just last on the transportation front, the goals are to support electric vehicle adoption in the county. And that's been going pretty well. And then obviously to support the infrastructure. And we've got the next agenda item or couple down that is part of developing that infrastructure. And then also supporting, we're not the lead on like reducing vehicle miles traveled. That's HCOG and HTA and other agencies, but we can provide a supporting role in that. And overall trying to reduce emissions from transportation. As far as activities, we're just in the process of wrapping up a grant from the California Energy Commission on medium duty, heavy duty fleet conversion and infrastructure. So working with fleet operators, public agencies on how to address emissions from larger, mostly commercial vehicles. And then we got a grant that's now just kicking off for installing EV charging at a number of sites across the county. And then any minute now, we're going to be launching the next round of the e-bike rebate program that was very successful, that came out of our sort of community sourcing process with the Community Advisory Committee. We had an initial round and that went very quickly. And so I'm going to talk just a couple of slides as a sort of teaser, because this one's about to launch, and so it's something to maybe share with the community. That we're going to have a new program. It's a little bit different structure. And so this program is really teeing off. There's a statewide e-bike incentive program, and we really wanted to complement and not sort of duplicate or be at cross purposes with that. And so we've really tried to align our program with that. one of the things that staff has done is done a lot of research on other e-bike programs and studies about those in Denver and Davis and all around the country, of the sort of results of like, well, how much do people use these, and looking at, you know, income versus utilization. And so quite a lot of sort of research to refine our program. And from a greenhouse gas standpoint and also sort of a benefits program, one of the takeaways was low income people use their e-bikes a lot more than wealthier people. And so they actually use it to like replace trips as opposed to like, you know, have fun on the weekend. And so, and then obviously, you know, they're also the part of the community that probably has less ability to buy, you know, a more expensive bike. And then also benefits from the cost savings of that compared to a vehicle. And so the state program, and so this is where it's been we've been waiting for this for a while. We've been ready to launch our program since the spring. But we wanted to basically not have people get our incentive and then miss out on the state incentives. We've been trying to kind of pair them up. But the state program, which you know, we're sort of piggybacking on, is really focused on point of sale and really focused on brick and mortar bike shops, so that you're not just buying a bike on Amazon, but you're buying it from a place that can service it. Because that's one of the issues, is there've been a lot of challenges with like cheap bikes that then aren't repairable, and the local shops can't fix them, or they have custom parts that you can't even like order. And so really buying a bike from a brick and mortar shop obviously has economic development kind of benefits, because you're like spending your money in the community instead of on Amazon. But then those bikes are actually a bike that a bike shop is ready to service and like can repair and do maintenance on. So the state program is focused on that. And so it's really a voucher that you take to a bike shop and say, okay, I can get a discount at the bike shop. They have an online portal that's just now hopefully going to be launching soon. You know, it has to have pedals, so it's got to be sort of a, you know, at least partly a bike, not just like a electric scooter or something like that. And you're supposed to own it for a year, which, and so there's, you know, it's a fairly large incentive for income eligible residents. And so if you qualify, you know, it's a pretty big incentive to help, you know, a low income resident get one of these bikes. And so that's the state program. Our program is, we're hoping to launch in Q3. Again, we're waiting for the state one to go live so we can say, all right, add ours to that. We don't want to like have somebody get our rebate and then be like, I just missed out on $1,000 that I could have gotten if I waited a week. So since it's not retroactive, you know, we've been kind of holding back on kind of not wanting to pre-incentivize people and have them miss out on the larger state rebate. And so 75% of the rebate is going to be reserved for income qualified residents. And we're just teeing off of the state program. So it's like, if you got the state rebate, then we know you're qualified. We don't have to like make you do more paperwork. We can just see that. And again, we're doing the same, where it's going to be only at brick and mortar local bike shops, not online sales, to ensure that they're serviceable and, you know, and can be maintained. You know, reserving some of the funds for adaptive bikes for people with mobility challenges. And so, you know, the rebates are again, like sort of more modest than the state rebate, but, you know, so the base rebate's 150. If it's a cargo bike that can like carry groceries and, you know, kids and stuff like that, it's 350. And then it's a larger $500 voucher for income qualified residents, and using again the state kind of criteria for that. And then for the adaptive bikes like that one, a larger incentive to help people with mobility challenges. And then with the bike shops, you know, part of it is to make sure that people are getting training on how to like use their bikes safely, because they can go fast and, you know, it's a little bit different than a regular bike. And then make sure that there's maintenance. And having like a tune-up, because it's like, okay, you get it and you start riding it. It's like, oh, you know, things get loose. So it's not quite, the seat's not right. So kind of trying to make sure that they're actually successful and that's not something that just ends up in somebody's garage. And making sure that it's something that has a warranty, that it's UL listed so that it's not going to catch on fire. And then basically, you know, people will bring the voucher to the bike shop and the bike shop will get the money from RCEA. So that's a quick recap of that program. And I just wanted to dive into that a little bit deeper. We did a deeper dive with the Community Advisory Committee because the e-bike program originated there. But since this will be launching, hopefully, whenever the state program launches very soon, it'll be something for the community to be able to participate in. So I think that was my last slide on the repower update.
Thank you, Matthew. Questions, comments from the board?
I have a question. Is there any conversation about doing any sort of a group purchase of bikes to get the price down so that they're a little bit more affordable, you know, and the rebates can be used and make them more affordable?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, we've talked about that in the past, and you know, we've even talked about that with like solar and things like that. You know, but you know, I feel like one of the things is that like each bike shop kind of has like, oh, well, we sell this bike or we do this one, you know, and so we've tried not to sort of be too prescriptive of like, you know, it has to be safe and reliable and those things, but not to say, okay, everybody's got to sell the Schwinn, whatever, you know, or
right.
And so we haven't really looked at like a group buy, but that's something that could maybe, you know, let me bring that back to our team that's working on this, because it might be, you know, if all the bike shops are selling the same bike, it might be like, hey, why don't you guys like, we're going to have X number of rebates. Like, can we help you guys, you know, bring the cost down through like a bulk buy kind of approach? That's a good idea.
I just bring that up because I did a little research because I thought I wanted a bike, and there's all these affordable bikes out there, but then you go into the bike shop and they're not what they have in the bike shop. And the bike shop is bottom line is $2,500 or so at the bike shop. So even with your rebates, with your double rebates, somebody still has to shell out $1,000 for a bike. So, you know, some sort of group buy down might really forward that program.
And, you know, and that's one of the challenges. The first round we had, like, we actually had to like change the rebate structure because we had like a rebate that like, oh, I can get this bike at Costco that was like cheaper than like, you know, like the rebate practically paid for the whole thing. But then some of them like had custom tires that you couldn't even like buy. And so someone got a flat tire and it was just like, couldn't get a tire to replace it. It's like, it's a flat tire, it's done, you know? And so, and that's one of the challenges that a lot of people stopped using them because they would have maintenance issues. And so it was like the upfront cost was low, but then there was no sort of like ability to repair, or you had to like take the whole thing apart. And like, it was, you know, they weren't designed. They were designed to kind of break and throw away, not like serviceable. And so it's a good point though, but you know, a bulk kind of approach can help maybe get the quality, but at a, you know, a better price point. So.
I just had a quick question, just to confirm, the two incentives, the state incentive and RCEAs can be stacked. Okay.
Yeah. And that's where we didn't want to like duplicate the state incentive. We wanted to like sort of enhance it and, you know,
great,
leverage it to.
And I just wanted to say, if you're sharing this with people, you know, we have a website on our website. You can sign up for updates. So when the state program goes live, and we're encouraging people to get all their income verification document, and we outline that so that people are ready to go, because there is a thought that this program is going to be oversubscribed quickly. So we're trying to get the message out and get people prepared.
Yeah, the state has a lot of funding, but it's also like statewide, and it's been like 3 years in the making or something. So it might go pretty quick once it actually launches. I mean, we've seen that with some other incentive programs where it's like 12 hours later, all the incentives are gone. So yeah.
Are we going to inform our ratepayers about this? Have newsletters or?
Yeah, so we've done, you know, we have, you know, we included it in the annual report, and then we have a mailing list of, I forget, like 3,000 people or something like that we've sent it out to. And we're going to continue to kind of ramp that up. You know, we didn't want to advertise it too soon when it was like, who knows when it's going to happen. But I think now that the state actually launched their webpage, it's not live yet, but like they put it up at least. So it's like, oh, you can start learning about how you can do it. And so I think we're going to kind of ramp up the campaign to educate people so that they're like, hey, I went and figured out what I want to do and I got my stuff in line. So when they actually say, here, it's live, click the button, you can do it.
And the bike shops are starting to advertise it as well.
Okay, great.
Anybody else from the board? Go ahead, Nellie.
I am curious about a different topic, that you touched on earlier, though. So I'm still working to wrap my mind around, and I don't think, we know yet what the transmission routes for offshore wind energy will look like. I know Schatz has been doing awesome work around that, but it's still in some kind of early stages. So I have a question about now seems like the right time to start thinking about like meeting multiple objectives through that, like whether it's achieving other objectives through whatever transmission routes are being explored and potentially advocating for some of those transmission routes to be set for their multiple benefits. So when I say multiple benefits, I mean, like, could we achieve more reliability of energy for tribal nations? Or could we achieve completion of the Great Redwood Trail if an alignment were to go along that same corridor, or something like that, that could meet multiple objectives that are part of our strategic plan and part of regional plans? So where do you think that whole piece fits in timing wise?
I think you're right that now's the time to engage on that. I mean, so it's, transmission planning is usually like a 10-year process, although you could say that we're probably in like year 2 or 3 of that, because they already have started looking at like how much power and what are the routes. To start talking about like, well, okay, if you're doing a high voltage DC line down from here to Mendocino, it's like, a substation on that is like $500 million. And so you're not just going to put one in Garberville and put one in it's like, it's going to be, a mega highway, not like with expensive off-ramps. And so I think, talking about how we need to not be like sort of flyover country for that infrastructure. It's not too soon to engage in that topic. And luckily, I think, that's been brought up. It's already part of the conversation. And so, as this is being brought up by California Independent System Operator and the CPC about planning for transmission, the local community and local tribes have already kind of said, hey, we need, this needs to not just be about getting power to the Bay Area, but also about local infrastructure. So.
And if I may, the thing I'm hearing about it is that sentiment right there. Like, we need to not be left out, but I'm a little bit anxious to define what not being left out means, and what other like potential benefits we could be seeing, and have some thinking around that to be able to help influence like the next phase of whittling down of those transmission alternatives before we get to the point where there's like 3 preferred alternatives. And so I don't know what this board's role is in that, or, our organization's role in that. It seems like we are, given our strategic plan, extremely well primed to convey a message about what this community needs and wants. What do you see there?
Yeah, no, I think, it could be good to refine like, what does success look like from the local perspective? So it's like, all right, there's a giant transmission line because of the Bay Area. Like, that's part of the picture, because that's what's going to happen. But like, what does it look like, on the ground? Like, what goes along with that? And like, how is that done? I think we can refine that, because, it's like, well, and they might not be like the exact same thing. So let's just say, oh, the best route for offshore wind is to go south, straight south. Like, well, that doesn't address inland issues, it doesn't address Hoopa and Willow Creek, and so, so we need to kind of maybe package it as saying, like, if we're going to have this investment in the region, it needs to not just be looking at, transmitting offshore wind to population centers. It needs to be more, whether or not the line's going this way or that way, we need to identify what the infrastructure needs are and kind of advocate for like, hey, this is like a rounding error on the big picture number. And so it needs to be included in the planning. And I'll say, we're not with specifics, but, we're already advocating for that. I mean, I was just at a meeting, and so there was like the head of the California Independent System Operator and the CPUC and, someone from the governor's office and the Energy Commission. And like, this was part of the conversation was about like infrastructure build out to address not just offshore wind, but local resilience and reliability concerns. And so,
Yeah, I totally appreciate that. And I just want to kind of figure out what our board's role is in helping to get that information from within our communities. And I like trust and know that you're engaged in a lot of those conversations, and many people who need to be are like in the room. It's like the number one kind of equity concern that keeps coming up from constituents is like, and so we all agree that like, we don't want to be bypassed by the benefit of this, but what that means is, like the wind energy developers themselves were just asking me at a social event the other day, over dinner, like, okay, so what does not being bypassed look like to you? And I was like, well, let me like circle up some good minds and find out. So if they're already starting to ask the question of like, how do we plan our stuff so that it doesn't leave you out? Then I'm hopeful that this board will help.
Yeah. And maybe a next step is to look at like where the problems are, and so we've talked about that a little bit in the past, but it's like, if you look at like the Willow Creek Koopa area, it's like, okay, there's like definite constraints and problems. If you look at like Southern Humboldt, there's like definite constraints and problems. So, but there's other areas too. And so we can help maybe refine, like, these are the places that need investment, from a reliability standpoint, so that we actually have like a map and say like, here's what the state or whoever needs to kind of like focus on, not just kind of like conceptually, like make us more reliable, but it's like, no, make this circuit that goes out to Honeydew more reliable,
So would you suggest that be a future agenda topic all on its own?
I just wrote that down.
Okay. It fits in with our strategic plan so nicely. I wasn't sure but it does feel like it's a standalone in many ways.
Yeah, I guess what I was going to say was that, our strategic plan is kind of split into these 4 categories, and when we started the CCA, it was, we're all about, the generation and, buying the power and transmission distribution. That's not us. If you look on your bill, that's all PG&E. But we can't be that way now. We have to, my own opinion, we as RCEA need to weigh in on that. So whether that looks like, the way we can do things, which is, hey, let's learn about it. Staff, you guys need to, package it up so the board can make, informed decisions. Then we kind of create a policy of where we stand. And maybe that's the way we go. I don't know. That's a maybe, but I did just write that down under future agenda items.
May I say one more thing on this topic? I know
it's
going over time.
It's okay. It's important. This is super important.
It's like the number one thing that I'm getting now is like all this stuff funneled to me about this question. But I also know that SHOTS has like a need for funding for the next phase of study. And I personally would love that study to be done locally with the like experts that we have there. And so I also am wondering what our role is in advocating for that funding to come to local minds who understand the local conditions as part of that question. So that's the other piece I'd like to bring.
Yeah, I think, certainly pursuing outside funding. I will remind you that the board approved $200,000 for analysis of the local grid and kind of its condition and, what needs to be addressed. And so, we board approved some budget for that for this fiscal year to do that. We haven't put together a strategy for how to spend that yet, but so we do have a budget line item for that specific topic.
Yes, sure. Cool. Okay, anybody else on the board? Go to the public already?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Now's the time for public comment on item 6.2. Okay. Thank you for that information and discussion, folks. No new business. All right, on to old business, and this is about Foster Clean Power.
I actually don't have any slides. It's me. Hi, everyone. I know we're after 5, so I'll try to make this brief. Jocelyn Gwynn, Senior Manager of Power Resources. So this is for a proposed amendment to our proposed agreement with Renewable America, the Foster Clean Power A project, which is being developed. It's a 3 megawatt solar and 1.25 megawatt battery project in the Arcata Bottoms, just off Foster Avenue, that's being developed. The project does have its conditional use permit, so I didn't mention that in the staff report, but that's important. This proposed amendment does 3 things. So a few of which are pretty important to ensure that the project can continue in its development. So the first thing it does is it increases the price for the storage component, the battery storage, which may not be a shocker to all of you. So the developer came to us a few months ago reporting that they were having challenges financing the project with the storage price that was in the contract. And that, battery storage equipment costs have been going up, financing costs. We all know interest rates have gone up over the past year since this contract was executed. So the price increase would be to, ensure the developer can cover those costs, but also more importantly, to make sure that they can actually get the financing to move forward, start securing equipment, and commence construction. One nuance of this contract that I just want to highlight is that there are actually 2 storage prices. There's one default storage price for the scenario under which the project can deliver resource adequacy to RCEA. And then there's also a reduced adjusted storage price that would kick in the scenario that the project is not successful in providing resource adequacy. So that we built that into the original agreement at the developer's request due to the uncertainty in the project getting that what's called a deliverability allocation from the grid operator that is, a necessity to deliver resource adequacy. It's pretty hard for small projects such as this to get that deliverability allocation because the costs associated with the studies required for that and the timelines as well for those studies are very burdensome. So the storage, both of those, the with RA scenario and the non-RA scenario, those prices are both proposed to increase under this amendment. The with RA default scenario would be increasing by 38%, and the without RA scenario would be increasing by 120%, which sounds really large. But I will tell you that, even though these prices are confidential, they were quite low to begin with. And we have confirmed, with this price increase, before we agreed to, write the amendment this way, we, had the Energy Authority do analysis to ensure that the project is still delivering value to RCEA's portfolio, so that, we can confirm that the value of the products that we would get under both scenarios, both, with RA and without, would be more, in a net positive revenue scenario, versus the procuring those products, which we do have to procure on a short-term basis, the contract. Staff have worked pretty diligently with the developer over the last few months to try to mitigate this price increase as much as possible, to ensure, that RCEA is not shouldering the entire burden, and that both parties are really sharing in these cost increases. And so they actually are on the line as well if there are any questions at the end of the presentation that we have for them that staff can't answer. But yeah, so the price increase is to ensure that, RCEA is still seeing some value, but that the project can move forward in development. So the second thing that this amendment does is it actually delays the milestone dates for commercial operation and construction start by 6 months. And that is to account for the fact that we had a very wet winter last winter. We referenced earlier, that actually caused the soil conditions at the site to be so wet that through the summer when the project was supposed to start construction, that the tests for putting in the piles for the foundation actually couldn't be conducted, and construction couldn't commence. The delay is also in part due to the financing challenge that I mentioned earlier. We have confirmed that the delay, the 6-month delay, will not impact our compliance with the CPUC's midterm reliability order, which we are claiming this project for. And that's just because the original commercial operation date in the contract was actually far enough in advance of the CPUC's deadline that we could, absorb this scheduled delay and still claim the project for that particular tranche. The third thing that the amendment does is it enables us to, and I actually forgot to include this in the staff report, so apologies for that oversight. It actually takes up most of the amendment, is that it enables us to charge the battery using grid power, whereas the original agreement required us to just charge the battery from the solar generator. And that is because, prior to the Inflation Reduction Act getting passed last fall, batteries, standalone storage projects were not eligible for the investment tax credit. So any projects that included storage required it to be charged from the renewable generator so they could take advantage of that tax credit. And with the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act, now we can, standalone storage projects can get that tax credit. So grid charging is no longer a concern. And this enables, this ability enables RCEA to have more flexibility in when we charge the battery. So we can do that when solar insolation is low, in Humboldt, but maybe high elsewhere. And we want to charge it during the day and still take advantage of those high evening prices and high demand hours. I think that is it for what the amendment covers, and I can answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
I have a question that
Go for it.
slightly irrelevant, but charging and discharging, what's the percentage of power loss, or is there any power loss when you
Yeah, I think in this contract, we have a round trip efficiency, which is kind of how that's termed in the industry, of like 85%. I would have to confirm that in the contract, but yeah, it's 15% losses. It's usually in the 80s. We have seen higher though in the 90s. It kind of depends on what the developer is willing to, commit to based on their equipment that they're planning to use.
but in general, the efficiency of the whole process is something in the 85 to 90% range?
Yeah. In the battery, yes, in the battery losses, there might be, there probably are more losses in the, conversion of DC to AC and the inverters and things like that.
Okay.
So it might be a little higher than that.
All right. Thank you.
Anybody else from the board? No? Okay, I'll take it out to the public. We're on item 1. This is approving amendment 1 to the Foster Clean Power power purchase agreement.
No online.
All right, I'll take it back up to the board and we'll entertain any motions.
Can I just ask really quick before we take a vote? Director Myers had to log off at 5, so we no longer have remote participation. So can we do a show of hands vote?
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Annie.
I'll move approval of the amendment.
I will second.
Okay. You want me to?
Yep. All right. So show of hands for aye.
Aye.
Like unanimous, motion passed.
Thank you, Ren. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, 8.2, electric vehicle charging hub project design contract. This is also an action item.
Yeah.
Technically.
And I'll just cover this one very quickly, although Dana is here. If there's any questions, he can dive into the details. But as was mentioned, we got a grant to install electric vehicle charging stations at 10 sites across the county. It's on page, I think it's 84. The actual packet is where the list is. And so those are, Orleans, McKinleyville, Mad River Hospital, site in Arcata, Eureka, College of the Redwoods, a couple in Fortuna, Redway, Garberville. And so they're sort of rural kind of community focused sites. And so this is requesting approval for the hiring the electrical design and engineering services. We put out an RFP. We got, I think, 2 responses. Only one was local, and the local one also happened to be dramatically lower cost. And so it was not a difficult recommendation to make to select Whitchurch Engineering to do the engineering design for these sites, which then will obviously then go to construction. That'll be a next step of the process, but this is to hire the firm to do the engineering.
Any questions from the board?
I have a question for Nancy. Yeah. The tribe is actually has a service agreement with Whitchurch on a totally unrelated project. Should I recuse?
No need, totally unrelated. It doesn't impact you personally in any financial way.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
All right. So no comments from the board? Other than that. Okay, I'll take it out to the public. Item 8.2.
Nothing online.
Buddy, all right, bring it back up to the board and entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to authorize executive director to execute all applicable documents.
I second that.
Okay, those who say aye, raise their hands. Unanimous, motion passed.
Thank you, everybody. Business. Got some great new business.
I was not gonna have slides that Sherry said, are we gonna have pictures?
Yeah.
I have slides.
You have to have before and after and during and.
I found documents going back 3 years since early 2020 that RCA has been looking for a permanent home. I think it probably goes back further than that this has been on the table. We currently rent. We've had to expand to a second rental location just to house all of our existing staff. And, with rural Ren, we're just getting more and more staff. So originally it was determined we needed about 10,000 square feet for our office space. It's looking more like we need 15,000, which would include a public meeting space, a public education center, place where people can come learn more about RCA and what we offer. And, we would hope to have also a little bit of a training center to have some of the workshops we put on for the public on top of our office space for our expanding staff. We have been unsuccessful in locating something that we, can afford. We've gotten outbid on a number of properties that meet our needs. And so per board direction, we started looking at vacant parcels. And just so happens, walking from our existing space to our new rental, I passed by this vacant parcel multiple times and thought, I wonder if they'd sell it to us. So per board direction, we did make an offer and they accepted. And so we're here before you today to get authorization for the executive director to sign over for, it's 805 3rd Street. And so this is zoomed out, but you can see our 633 3rd Street where we've been. And then on the far side of 3rd Street is our new rental. So here's your glorious picture, Sherry. I'm not a photographer.
Hey, it doesn't just imagine it
Now, but
Flat and empty.
Yes. So it's 600 square feet. It is zoned office, multi-family residential. It is in the parking assessment district of Eureka, which means we are not required to put in any parking. And there are no setbacks, so we can develop this whole lot for our office purposes. In this zone, we can go up 100 feet, but there is a restriction that we can't. We're limited to 250% of the lot. So the square footage of the lot, our gross square footage of the building can't be more than 250%. So to just kind of break that down, we're likely to do 3 stories for about 16,000 square feet if we were to develop, the maximum that we could on this lot. And I talked to the City of Eureka Planning Department. Their requirement is the first floor needs to be open to the public, have displays. It is really in line with what we're envisioning for our office space. Just what I was saying. So we did do, as part of other negotiations, we got a statement of value for an empty lot just 2 blocks away at 2nd and I Street. And so when we came to the board, they felt comfortable adjusting per the square footage and using that statement of value to make our offer, which they accepted. So we're looking at a $285,000 purchase price. And so before you is approving the resolution accepting real property interest in assessor parcel number 001-131-007 and approving the expenditure of $285,000 plus closing fees and costs. And we have agreed to cover 100% of the closing costs and fees. This property was not on the market, but the sellers have been very amenable to working with us and selling it to us. And I don't know if you want to add anything, Matthew.
Anything else?
Covered it.
All right. Good job. Who was on the committee of us? Thank you, guys.
Scott.
Thank you so much. Any comments from anybody on the?
Just a question. So this is a cash offer. We're not going into any debt.
Nope.
We're just going to buy it.
Cash offer. And we will come back to the board for any decisions on the development of the property. So that'll be the next step. And likely we'll extend the board subcommittee to help us go through that process.
You guys didn't know that, huh?
Or a new subcommittee.
Membership.
I'm kidding.
All right. Any other questions from the board?
No question, just very exciting to have this in finally open session with everybody. I think my first RCEA meeting, like almost 3 years ago, we had closed session on looking at properties. So it's exciting.
Nancy asked if I was excited and I was like, when we close escrow, I'll get it.
All right.
I do.
Yeah, go ahead, Nellie.
One comment, which is that obviously development decisions will be made later, but we could. I feel very sure that a variance would be strongly considered. Obviously, I can't speak for the city of Eureka on the height should or square footage should we want to build bigger. So always an option.
Yeah. Anybody else from the
Good thing
board?
you're on the subcommittee. But
Yeah. All right. I'll take that to the public now. Nobody?
Mine.
Okay. So we have two things to approve. Do we have to do them separately, Nancy?
No, what you can do staff recommendation in one motion.
Okay. Anybody want to do that?
so moved.
You can have it.
So moved.
I'll second.
9.1.
All right.
Okay, those who say aye, show of hands. Unanimous, motion passed. Ooh.
Okay.
Yay. Thank you, Eileen and staff and subcommittee. Thank you. Thank you.
When did we actually start this?
Pandemic, because we were looking at properties. Yeah, and then it was like, I think the year before, and then we kind of put the brakes on. We're like, oh, okay. And then, yeah, so it's been like 4 years or something.
I remember Mike Wilson wanted to have something on the roof overlooking the bay. Yeah.
Started it before that.
Been a while.
The library.
Yeah.
So that went,
Yeah, cool deal. Okay,
so
staff reports, 10.1.
I don't think I mentioned in the repower update, just there might be a light at the end of the tunnel for Santorini, at least having a firm timeline. So stay tuned for that. But and I'll just mention, I did just come back from the RCEA annual sort of strategic planning meeting, and it was exciting because I feel like we're part of a pretty dynamic group of like public agencies that are really working on cool stuff. And it's like, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? It's also sad, but reassuring that they're also having the same struggles with like procurement and, so that we're not unique in our problems as far as, it's not like, oh, everyone else has got the secret sauce. And so they're experiencing the same project delays and challenges with procurement. And, like the resource adequacy stuff, it's like, everyone's struggling with kind of some of the same issues. The good news is that there's also, some strategies developing of how to advocate, or even at the federal level, then the state level, on some of the things like just the cost of the resource adequacy has just gotten so out of control. And that's not something that's regulated at the state level. It's like the federal energy regulatory, like it's FERC that does that. And so, it sounded like maybe there's some ways that, we might advocate to kind of like put price caps, because it's really like approaching price gouging, where it's like, hey, it's the same power plants, but they're charging 100 times more than they used to charge. And you can't chalk that up to natural gas prices or inflate, it's starting to get to be, a problem. And the state's like, well, we don't regulate that. It's like bilateral markets just between you and the seller. And so, but FERC does. And so, the bad news and the good news is that we're not alone in our challenges, but I think, that's where there's hopefully going to be some increasing efforts to try to address some of these just market constraints that have been kind of hammering us financially. So.
Can I steal some of yours?
Sure.
Sorry. I wanted to bring up the venue change.
Oh, yeah.
We've been looking at other places to meet for our board meeting, and we are likely going to have our next board meeting at the Wharfinger, the Bay Room, which is downstairs. We've just had some sound issues in this location, and we think this will be better. And it's a much more accessible space for those that have mobility issues. And so that was a consideration in moving. So more to come on that. We'll make sure everyone knows where to go for next meeting. And then the other quick update is we're having a vendor contractor open house at our 633 location, October 25th. There's info on our website, but we're once a year, we invite vendors and contractors to come in and learn more about what RCEA offers for our heat pumps and equipment rebates. And that is 7:30 a.m. to 11. We try to get it before they're going out to job sites and come have a little breakfast with RCEA staff. And then the last thing I wanted to introduce Faith.
Oh, yeah.
I'll let you introduce.
I will introduce Faith, who's our new regulatory and legislative policy manager. So we're sad to have Aisha stolen by San Diego, but we're happy to welcome Faith, who just started this week, and will be coming back to you with regulatory items, and so
welcome.
Hey. All right. Anything else on staff reports? Good. Future agenda item. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. I forgot. The public. Anybody from the public on item 2? And nobody here?
Sure. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Will the CAC meetings also be at the new location?
Right now, we're gonna still have them here. And we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, moving on to future agenda items, there is one that I wrote about. Let's start thinking about distribution as a board. Do you need more direction than that? It's pretty broad.
Understood the question, yeah.
Okay, what is our CEA role? The funding that we already approved in this budget, what are we doing with that? How are we going to spend that? This is an opportunity for the board to talk about what we care about on these things.
Yeah, good advocacy.
For
Yep.
transmission specifically.
Yep, transmission, distribution. Anything else though for future agenda items?
I think the topic we were talking about earlier, I'd love to kind of think about, because we know it's not just the ED position, where there's competition from other agencies that are that we're experiencing. So I'd love for the board to have the opportunity to evaluate whether we want to make a change to the structure that we're using, commensurate with the conversation we're having earlier. Is that enough clarity?
I think so.
Okay, and see what the pleasure of the board is at that time.
I second that.
I third.
That we need that, but yeah.
Good.
That's gonna be the most equitable thing to do. And we've already seen, like you said, that Aisha, left to go work a remote job in San Diego. So we're seeing it not just at the ED level, but at, other middle management levels as well.
Yep.
And I fully support the staff that we have now and the decision that was made earlier. I just wanted to talk about it more. So if we agendize it for a future conversation.
Yep. Any other ones? Thank you, Nellie. I forgot.
That's okay.
Anything else? Okay, I bring it out to the public on future agenda items. Nothing?
Online.
All right, so then I can adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody.